I've been working in the self-publishing world for almost 8 years now, and if there's one thing I think that hasn't changed in that time is a general reluctance for first-time authors to bring other people into the process. They don't want to have to spend all this money if they are not going to be making the money back at the end, which is kind of a backward way to think about it, because if you're talking about any other kind of business, and self-publishing is a business, there is always that investment that's required right at the beginning to allow that business person to put out a professional product. Anyway, a few months ago I was asked by the Alliance of Independent Authors to put together a panel of professionals to talk about how professional editors, cover designers and marketers can help authors be profitable. And as a little treat, I thought I'd share that with you today. It was recorded back at the end of summer, so you'll see that my hair is shorter and my skin is perhaps less sallow, but I hope you enjoy this panel discussion on how to write and publish for profit. Today, I'm going to be putting on my marketer's hat because ultimately I am a marketer. I'm going to go through this and maybe map out the customer journey to give you an idea of where one gets their readers and how one holds them by the hand and takes them to the point where they become lifelong readers. And then I'm also going to be showing you how you can perhaps use Reedsy as a way to supplement your team and fast track your marketing efforts. So to start, I want to share with you a meme. This is maybe familiar to some of you. I'm worried already that this far into the conference, you may have seen this meme a handful of times already. In this version of it, you have phase 1, write a book. Then you have phase 3, which is profit. And somewhere in the middle, things get a little bit on the hazy side. So for this presentation, I'm going to try maybe fill that in to illuminate what those question marks might be. To give you an idea of what to expect, I think we're going to be covering about 3 points that should help take you from that writing a book phase to the profitability phase. And forgive me for using quite marketing-y terminology, but we're going to be talking about acquisition, we're going to be talking about conversion, and we're going to be talking about referral and repeat custom. If you're not quite sure what I mean by any of that, don't worry, we're going to cover it in no time. But first, let's get to that step number 1, acquisition. Where are you going to find those readers? Where are they coming from? How are you going to get them into your virtual shop? In traditional publishing, if you're a traditionally published author, this acquisition phase is maybe a little bit more straightforward. Your publisher will get your book placed into the major bookshops, your Barnes & Nobles, your Waterstones. They'll hopefully get these little displays near the checkout, or perhaps you'll be reviewed in a fantastic magazine or a newspaper. These are all fantastic ways to find and acquire readers, but they're not necessarily available to a lot of indie authors. So, what can indie authors do to get those readers? So for that, I'm going to bring on my first guest, Ricardo Fayet. Ricardo is one of the co-founders here at Reedsy. He's our Chief Marketing Officer, and he's also a book marketer in his own right. He's helped countless authors launch their books and run promos. He's also the author of the indispensable indie publishing manual, How to Market a Book, Overperform in a Crowded Market. Hello, Ricardo. Thank you for joining us.
For sure. Well, thanks for having me on this panel, Martin.
Now, Ricardo, can you break down for us the avenues through which indie authors can usually find new readers?
I think we got to think about how readers actually discover books. We ourselves, on top of authors, we're usually readers too. And so you can simply ask yourself the question, how do I actually, find my next read? Right? How do I find books? How do I personally discover books that I add to my reading list? I think most of the time, the way readers discover books is through recommendations, right? Through word of mouth. A friend who reads in your genre tells you, have you read this book? You really got to read it. And so you go and you buy it, thinking that you're going to read it at some point. So that's probably the number one way of discoverability is word of mouth. Obviously, that's not something you can really engineer through marketing, right? You cannot run ads or like have a newsletter that's going to create word of mouth out of nothing. But then there are other ways through which readers discover books. Another big one is through browsing retailers, right? Amazon, for example, is not just the number one retailer of books. It is also the world's largest search engine for books. Right? If you're looking for a book on a specific topic, for example, for nonfiction, if you're looking for a book on an obscure martial art, maybe you're going to search for that on Google. Maybe you're going to search for that on like Perplexity or ChatGPT or one of the new AIs. But I would still argue that most people still search for books on Amazon. And then Amazon, more on top of being a search engine, also sends recommendations to readers based on their reading history. And those recommendations are really powerful. And then obviously there's like other ways that are more influenceable by your marketing. Email. If you have obviously readers on your mailing list, then they're going to know about your new releases through your emails, right? Email marketing, it's not just your mailing list and the mailing list of other authors, but it's also mailing lists like BookBub, right? BookBub is essentially emails. BookBub sends emails to readers who have signed up for specific lists, saying, and I'm saying here BookBub, but same thing goes for all the other kind of promo newsletters out there. Bargain Booksy, Free Booksy, all the written word media, real estate, Fussy Librarian. Then, of course, there's social media, right? Social media has become a really important place where readers find out about books. This can be organically, like TikTok is king at that, right? Book Talk has emerged in the past few years as one of the main places where readers find new books. Right? One of the latest books that I personally read, I found out through Book Talk, and I probably spend less than 5 minutes of my time a week on BookTok, and it's just like, yeah, it's business related, but I still came across a video that was about horror books, and I was like, ooh, this looks cool. Social media can be really powerful for that, both organically and through advertising, right? Advertising on social media seems like a 2014 tactic, but it still works, right? Placing ads on Facebook, placing ads on Instagram, even now placing ads potentially on TikTok, all that kind of works, and that's another way through which readers find books, right? They open their Instagram app or their TikTok app or the Facebook app, they scroll down and, oh, this book looks interesting. Whether that's an organic post or an ad, they click on it, they buy the book, and they start reading. And then there's a bunch of other ways, right? Readers may find books at events, right? If they go to events like Dragon Con or Comic Con, things like that, they might find books. They might discover new authors at their stalls. That's not the primary way, but it still happens, right? So that's another way.
Now, most successful indie authors we'll hear from in this conference, no doubt, will have a good grasp on every one of these elements that we've spoken of. But creatives don't always have the bandwidth or the necessary skills to get great at every single one of these things. So that's where professional marketers can step in. Ricardo, can you give us a quick breakdown of what a professional marketer might be able to do for these indie authors?
Sure. I think there are a lot of ways in which a marketer can kind of help you, like a professional marketing person. The first one, I think, is strategy itself. It's coming up with a strategy either for your next launch or for your kind of writing career in general. If we're taking it in terms of strategy, it's a little bit what we talked about earlier. It's like, what kind of book do you write, right? How are you going to position them? Like, what genres do they fall in? How do you present them to readers? So like the cover, the blurb, etc. And finally, how are you intending on reaching those readers? And that will vary from one genre to another, right? For example, if you're writing very steamy books, you cannot advertise those usually on Amazon ads or Facebook ads, and that's why TikTok is so popular for steamy romance. Cozy mysteries that usually tend to have an older demographic then for TikTok advertising might not be as effective as, for example, Facebook advertising because of demographic. So that strategy, I think, is the most important service. It can take many forms. Probably the most popular one we see on Reedsy is like a marketer working on a launch plan, right? A marketing launch plan for a new release. And so the marketer is usually going to take a deep look at the book, sometimes read it. Not all of them will, but some will actually insist on reading the book before. Look at where it falls in the market, how it's presented, and then making a plan for the launch to maximize the number of readers who will come across the book and will hopefully buy it. So and also so that it plays into the algorithms of the various retailers, right? So that you get a maximum discoverability from these retailers. Another very common service is advertising, right? Advertising is something very, very easy to outsource because you just tell someone like, please run ads for my book on Amazon or on Facebook or on TikTok or on wherever that is, right? And you can quickly judge the results of that after even 1 or 2 months because you see if your sales go up or if they stay stable or they go down. And you can also compare if they go up, hopefully they should go up. If they go up, you can compare the increase that you get in royalties versus the cost of the ads, right? Your return on investment, as we say in marketing jargon. The third one is around email marketing. That's a little bit different because it's like if you kind of are starting to sell or are starting to have some success and you want to build a mailing list, which ideally you should have already, and you really don't have the time or the skills or the knowledge around email marketing to do that, then we do have some marketers on Reedsy who specialize in email marketing, like in setting up your list on a good email marketing provider like MailerLite or ConvertKit, segmenting the list based on your books, your different entry points into the mailing list, creating a welcome automation so that anyone who signs up receives a series of emails and learns about your books, and kind of coaches you on sending newsletters regularly, etc. These would be the 3 most common kinds of services that we see on Reedsy for marketing.
So ideally, what should authors be looking for in a professional book marketer that sort of makes them stand out from other marketers?
Yeah, so I personally interview every single marketer we add to the Reedsy marketplace. And the reason for that is that there are a lot of so-called marketers out there who are very good at kind of marketing themselves, but who don't necessarily have the actual knowledge and expertise to market other people's books, right? It can be a little bit dangerous. So that's why I insist on talking to every single marketer whom we consider for activation on Reedsy. And what I look for is mostly a knowledge of the publishing industry, right? And a knowledge of the common marketing practices that tend to work for authors. Right? So I wrote a whole book about that called How to Market a Book Overperform in a Crowded Market, which happens to be free in ebook format on all retailers. So you can search for How to Market a Book on Amazon or your favorite retailer, and you should find that book and you can grab it for free. And what I generally tell authors is like, before you go on hiring a marketer, learn yourself a little bit about marketing. So read that book, for example, right? That would be my advice. And the reason for that is you kind of want to make sure that the person you hire also has that knowledge, right? There are some amazing digital marketers out there who've done great work for gaming companies or movie production companies or real estate or whichever other industry. And they can have good instincts, good intuition for helping an author with their marketing. But at the end of the day, the book industry is very, very specific, right? And you kind of need to have the knowledge of stuff like metadata. How many categories can a book be in on Amazon? How do you select those categories for maximum exposure? What do you do with your keywords? What are also bots, and why are they important? What are some common promo sites? What are the best promo sites for this specific genre, for romance, for example? So those kind of questions, a professional marketer should be able to immediately answer them, right? It's the kind of knowledge that you're looking for. And then obviously you're looking for experience, right? If they've worked for a traditional publisher, that's usually a good sign. Traditional publishing and indie publishing are slightly different, right? Traditional publishers have much bigger budgets. They use some tactics which are not always relevant to indie authors, like billboard advertising in the tube or outside, etc. Like those tactics don't generally have a great ROI. They're great for brand building and ego boosting, and the big publishers care a lot about that. You as an indie author, you're probably going to care less about that. If they have some experience with traditional publishing, that's always going to be a plus, right? Because there are also some tactics that traditional publishers use, especially in terms of influencer marketing, which are a little bit underutilized in the indie publishing world, and you could definitely benefit from someone who has that kind of expertise. And then what you should be looking for is basically for them to have worked with a similar author in your genre, or at least an author in your genre. right? And ideally, an author in your genre who is then gone on to be successful, partly thanks to that marketer. So what we have on Reedsy for every marketer profile is a little project section where marketers highlight various specific projects that they've worked on, and they explain, what the book was about, what they did, and what the results were, right? And so try to find a marketer who's worked on a project or several projects that are similar to your book or similar to what you are looking for. So that's what I will look for in a marketer.
Okay, so now we know exactly where you can find those readers. But before you can actually acquire them, you need to first grab their attention and their interest. And as most people in this conference will probably tell you, one of the most important tools for doing just that is your book cover. So to find out exactly what impact a great professionally made cover can have, I want to bring on my next guest, a Reedsy designer from South Carolina. Please welcome Danna Mathias Steele. Danna, thank you for joining us.
Hi, Martin. Thank you so much for having me again. It's great to be here.
Danna, while a lot of the designers we have at Reedsy come from a traditional publishing background, working in-house for major presses, you cut your teeth in the belly of the beast, so to speak, working in Amazon itself. Can you talk to us a little bit more about your time at Amazon and what you've learned about the impact of great cover design?
Starting my career at Amazon, I think, gave me sort of a different perspective on design and its role in publishing. I was also given a unique opportunity, I think, to consider the cover from point of sale backwards. So in other words, we had the advantage of knowing exactly how the end product would be presented to the potential buyer, which is by a thumbnail image on a website. The importance of a cover designed to work as a thumbnail image really cannot be understated. You've got a really short window, probably 4 seconds or less, to grab the customer's attention. So you've got to take as much advantage of that as possible. This does usually mean focusing less on smaller, more intricate details, and also putting an emphasis on clear, easy to read titles, really quickly identifiable imagery, things like that.
What do you think is the most important thing that a cover design should communicate to a reader?
As far as communication goes, there's always going to be a hierarchy of elements. So there's the image, title, subtitle, if that applies, author name, so forth. At the outset of the design, I think it's really important to identify the most important of those elements and keep it at top of mind as you develop the rest of the cover. So if you've got a really unique title that you think is going to stick in people's heads and you want them to remember that, put that big, put that first, put it bright and very clear. If you've got a really interesting piece of art or a really interesting concept that you're using for the cover image, make that first. Make it the biggest thing, make it the clearest thing, and so forth.
Now on Reedsy, many of our designers have genres in which they specialize. But having a quick look through your profile, I see that you have a real wide range of genres in which you work. How important is it for a cover design to reflect current trends? And how do you ensure that your clients' designs are still distinct and unique while sticking to those trends?
Trends exist for a reason, right? So in the case of publishing, I think even more than ever, design trends help the potential reader really quickly identify your genre or your style as something that they might like to read. At the end of the day, as many beautiful covers as there are out there, book covers are not a work of art. I know that's not really something we want to hear, but they're an advertisement to your reader. So you want to make sure that you are advertising your correct target audience, and trends are what's going to help you get there. When researching for a new project, one of the first things I like to always ask my authors is what books they might envision themselves next to on a bookshelf. This gives me a really good general sense of direction that they'd like to go in. So from there, I'll usually also do a search on Amazon for their specific genre and subgenre. I will try and get as specific in the genre as you can get and see what other covers are trending in that space. Those are the covers that the author's book is going to be presented with. So I want to know what the competition is. I'll take note of different colors, fonts, imagery, kind of overall style and things like that. And then from there, I sort of start pulling things together. I do a lot of research on Goodreads. I like to see kind of what's coming out, what's coming next, things like that. Honestly, Amazon is really your best friend in this case. I would say that researching by subgenre is really going to get you where you want to be. And if there's not a lot in that subgenre, that's even better, because we know we can, blow it out of the water with, a really incredible cover design that stands out incredibly against the rest of the competition.
With indie authors, many of whom haven't published a book before, creating the book cover is maybe one of the most exciting parts of the process. Speaking with many of our designers, it's not unusual for authors to have very precise visions for what their cover will look like. So how do you deliver something that you know will work while still keeping the author involved creatively?
Really specific visions for cover design are always really interesting. And one thing I've actually found is a lot of times the author's gut and the image or, concept that they're looking for is right. But sometimes it just needs a little bit of adjustment or tweaking to help them land into their genre. I'm also really upfront with my authors. So if I don't think a suggested element is going to work, I'm really clear with that upfront, why we should steer away from it, propose another solution that I think may work better for them, things like that. At the end of the day, it's always about compromise. It's always about communicating with the client clearly. And I think collaboration is always going to get you the best end product.
Thank you, Danna. There we sort of have the acquisition part of our equation. We have a way to reach potential readers, and we have a key image that can get their attention and get them interested enough to click through to your retail page on Amazon or Kobo or Apple or Google Play. The final step is to get them to sign on the line that is dotted, to have them hit buy now and to actually go and purchase your book, get it off Kindle Unlimited and read it. Ricardo, I want to throw it back to you. So a reader lands on your book's product page, they're interested in this kind of book, and if they read it, they probably will love it. But what's going to push them over the edge and get them prepared and ready to actually part with their money?
Well, that's a really good question. And again, here, I think you need to answer it by thinking from the reader perspective, right? When I, as a reader, click on a book, whether that's from a BookBub newsletter or a book that I discover on a retailer or a book that I hear about on TikTok and I search for the book on Amazon or whatever my favorite retailer is, what's the first thing that I'm going to check out? The first thing I'm going to check out is a book description, for sure. I want to know what the book is about in the words of the author, right? Or in the words of the publisher. What is the book about? So I'm going to read the book description. That's why the book description is the single most important element when it comes to conversion. I've heard countless stories of authors changing their product description or their blurb, as we sometimes call it, and suddenly their sales doubled or tripled or quadrupled, whatever, overnight, just because they changed that little element. And it's incredibly important, especially if you're sending a lot of traffic to your book page from paid advertising, right? Because you're spending actual money to send readers to that page. And so the better your conversion is on that page, and usually that's like basically the better your blurb is, the less money you're going to have to spend to generate exactly the same amount of sales or even more, right? So it's having a really, really good book description, a really good blurb is essentially a way to save a ton of money on advertising. That's how you need to think about it. Now, I'm not a professional on book description, so I can't give you a ton of tips on that, but we got a bunch of resources on Reedsy. If you search for like how to write a good blurb or how to write a good book description, you're probably going to find an article with the advice from some of our top marketers on copywriting around how to do that. The next thing probably that readers are going to look at on your page is the reviews, right? Whether the book has any reviews. So there's two things when it comes to reviews. There's editorial reviews and customer reviews. If you're not aware of editorial reviews, they're a really, really cool feature that some retailers have, like in particular Amazon, right? They're a feature where you can basically highlight reviews from, in theory, editorial outlets or like well-known authors or publications, etc., right? And it's a section that appears on the page, that appears higher on the page than the customer reviews. So a reader scrolling down the Amazon book page to get to the customer reviews will come across the editorial reviews section if your book has one. And you have 100% control over that editorial review section. So you can actually put there the reviews that you're proudest of. In theory, again, they need to be from editorial outlets, but if there's a really well-written review from even a customer, you can feature it in there. Like Amazon won't say anything about that. Ideally, though, you'd want to feature reviews there from reputable sources, whether it's like Reedsy Discovery or like Kirkus or Publishers Weekly, or so that's like kind of editorial outlets. Those are nice, but what I'd say is even better are reviews from other authors in your genre. Ideally, well-known authors in your genre. That's what traditional publishers are really good at, because obviously they publish a bunch of authors. So if, I don't know, if, for example, Tor signs a new debut fantasy author, they're going to try to get a quote from Brandon Sanderson or another well-known fantasy author that they publish for that new release, right? And traditional publishers are obviously very good at that because they have the connections. You as an indie author, you don't necessarily have the connections, but if you manage, to get to know other authors in your genre, and conferences are the best way to do that, you can maybe get some of these quotes, some of these editorial reviews from not necessarily the biggest authors in your genre, not from Brandon Sanderson, right? But maybe you get some from like a well-known indie author, like an indie author who sells quite a lot of books, maybe a Bengali, for example, if we're staying in the epic fantasy realm, right? So that's kind of the power of editorial reviews. Obviously, then readers are going to check out customer reviews, because at the end of the day, a lot of readers know that the editorial reviews can be manipulated in some way, so they want to check out what actual customers say about the book. This is not something you have full control about, so it's not something that would fret too much over. I definitely wouldn't recommend reading your reviews when you get them, especially the negative ones. It's just the more books you're going to sell, the more reviews you're going to get, right? And if you start getting a lot of negative reviews, then maybe you need to look at what they, if they point out something similar, like problem with, I don't know, the editing, or I see that a lot with like foreign language books, reviews mentioning issues with the translation, then you need to take a hard look at the production of the book, right? The translator you hired. So next, they're going to look at the book description, they're going to look at the reviews. Then they might look at other elements on the page like A+ content, but honestly, all that's not as important. Next thing that's really important is the price, right? Lower prices are always going to lower the barrier to entry. And again, that's why price promotions tend to work so well as ways to increase your conversion, increase both your traffic through promo newsletters and your conversion, because there's a lower barrier to entry. And the last thing that some readers might do, probably not as many readers as you would think, but quite a large portion of them will basically look at a sample of the book, right? They will start reading the book. So all retailers have a functionality where you can read a sample of the book for free. That used to be called the Amazon Look Inside. I think now it's just called Read Sample. And basically you can read, I think, up to 10% of the book for free. And a lot of readers will do that before committing to buy the book. They'll read the first few pages, and if they like the first few pages and they get to the end of that sample and they're hooked, then you can be sure they're going to purchase, right? So that's kind of the purchasing journey from the moment the reader gets on the page to the moment, hopefully, that they buy. And you need to optimize every single stage of that journey, the most important one of which being the book description.
Authors are writers, but they aren't necessarily copywriters. How can a Reedsy marketer help them with their product page in terms of optimizing of the sales?
Yes, you're right that not everyone is a copywriter. And actually, copywriting is a very, very different skill to long-form writing. And that's actually, I think, the case for most authors out there, at least most authors that I know. They hate copywriting, right? They hate writing their book description. They think, I've written this 80,000 word masterpiece and you're asking me to summarize it in 3 paragraphs? No way. And that's because writing a book's description is not really about summarizing the book, right? It's about taking some elements from the book and creating a hook that's going to get readers interested from the first or even the first 2 sentences of the product description, right? Whether that's through social validation, whether that's through kind of tropes, whether that's through presenting the characters, then getting the readers to finish reading that book description and like start the reviews or start opening the book, reading the sample, etc. You don't have any experience at copywriting, or you just hate the prospect of doing that, then it can be a good idea to hire someone to do it for you. We do have professional copywriters, we call them like blurb and metadata experts on Reedsy, because usually it's not just about the product description, right? You want that product description to be part of your metadata and to be part of how you present the book to readers, right? Generally, you want your product description, especially for fiction, to show some clear tropes. Right, that identify the genre. If it's a romance blurb, for example, you in 99% of the cases, you will want your blurb to have first the viewpoint of a character and then the viewpoint of the other character that are going to be the protagonists of the romance, and kind of the conflicts as to why they can be together, and ultimately why these conflicts are going to be solved, of course, but the conflicts need to be there. The resolution doesn't need to be there, but the conflict needs to be there. So you need those tropes to be in there. Sometimes you also want to work kind of keywords themselves into the blurb for discoverability onto retailers. This is not so much the case on Amazon, but on other retailers, especially like Apple or Google Play, keywords in the book description can play an interesting role and an important role. And so professional marketers will be, like professional copywriters will be best placed to think about all these elements and conjugate them into the perfect product description for your book.
So now you have a steady stream of acquired users who are captivated by your cover design, who will head to your retail page and be convinced by your blurb there to actually buy the book. So, is it now time to start spending your newfound riches? Not yet. The final piece of the puzzle has still to be played, or should I say the first piece of your puzzle? Because in order for your book to be a success, it's actually got to be good. Your target reader needs to love it enough for them to leave a positive review, recommend it to their friends, buy it for their friends as a gift, read your next book, or post about it on social media. As Ricardo mentioned, book talk is a big thing. Who doesn't want to be the next big book talk sensation? Now, I'm not going to lie to you and tell you that you can come to Reedsy and we'll make you a better writer. But there is one particular resource that you can tap into that can make sure your book appeals to its readers enough for them to want to do all those things. And that is hiring a professional editor. Now, to help us understand what an editor can do to help us reach our goals, I'm going to bring on one of Reedsy's editors who have been with us since the beginning. Please welcome Rebecca Heyman. Rebecca, thank you for joining us.
Hey, Martin, glad to be here.
Now, I'm sure the folks watching at home know that editors do more than just correct typos. But from your perspective, what can editors do to help an author achieve their goals, at least on a sales level?
Editing can help a book sell by, first of all, ensuring that what's inside the book is worth reading. A cover might draw someone in, or name recognition might grab someone's attention. But ultimately, it's what's between the covers that counts. So, in that sense, editing is a wonderful cornerstone to just producing better content. But I also think editing is especially important to self-published authors, because editors can help you mimic the sort of standards and controls that often make traditionally published books so polished and so good. It's important to step outside of the vacuum of your own creativity, and an editor can be one of your most important creative partners as a collaborator, as like a sounding board, as a safe space to experiment with ideas you're not sure about. An editor can have a huge role in helping you develop your ideas, your brand, your series, and of course, hopefully taking you all the way to the end, where the content itself both reflects all of that work and invites readers to enjoy it.
Cool. Can you think of any project you've worked on before where you've encouraged your client to make some sort of change to their book that has helped them better appeal to their target reader?
When I first met Greta Kelly, she had come to me with what she thought was a YA romantasy. It was a really cool story and her writing is beautiful, but she had queried for some time. And while agents seemed interested in her concept, there was always some kind of disconnect that prevented them from offering her representation. I was, I think, maybe 10 or 15 pages into her book when I realized why that was happening. Greta had not written a YA romantasy. She had written a new adult or adult romantasy. And by reframing her end user, right, by redefining and reframing her reader as an adult, we were able to make some changes that brought more authenticity to her characters, more sort of dynamic world building to her pages, and really set her free to tell the story that was in her heart. Very shortly after our work together, Greta signed with an agent. She sold The Frozen Crown to a traditional publisher and, of course, eventually got a starred review in Publishers Weekly.
Now, one thing I mentioned earlier is this idea of repeat custom. I'm pretty sure people at this conference have already heard that one of the best ways to actually become profitable is to write in a series. So to write a book that's so good that people want to read its sequel or spin-offs or the next book that comes. If you know that a client of yours is working on book one of a planned series, what sort of guidance can you offer them that will sort of point them in the right direction?
My favorite advice for authors who want to write a series is to close a door but open a window in every single book. And what that means is you have sort of like big plot, right? The big plot that lasts from book 1 to book 7 or 17 or 3 or however many books you're planning. But within those larger mythological systems, we have to have a story of the week, right? We have to have a more digestible beginning, middle, end story that we can bring to a full conclusion in whatever book we're reading. So we close the door on that story, but we leave a window open for the larger mythological significance of that story within the series. And when I say mythology, I'm not just talking about magic and dragons, right? Like even a contemporary romance series has its own mythology. So you just want to make sure in any series that you have enough scaffolding, right? Like that you've got some really good bones on that broader mythology so that as you introduce different, story of the week plot lines, you can still carry through a larger, broader, a more expansive plot as well.
I'm returning to this idea of writing a book that people will want to recommend. In your experience as an editor and as a reader, what determines if a certain book is something that you would recommend to a friend or a colleague?
As you might imagine, book recommendations are something I take pretty seriously. People do look to me for recommendations quite often, in part because I'm an editor, but in part because I read so many books a year, usually in excess of 200 books a year. And so the thing more than anything else, what makes me recommend a book is the vibes. Right? Like I read genre fiction and I read literary fiction. It's sometimes about craft, right? Sometimes the language of a book is so moving and so beautiful that you almost can't help falling in love with the story. But more often than not, I recommend things that make me feel a certain kind of way. And whether they make me laugh or cry or fall in love a little bit or enhance my sense of wonder at the world, those lasting emotional impressions are what make me recommend a book. And I think over time, it's what makes readers recommend books, years and years after they've read them.
Okay, so good craft and excellent vibes, your keys to success. Thank you so much, Becca. Right, so to sum things up, there are so many things that you need to get right if you want to give your book the best chance to succeed. You need to know where to find your target readers. You need to have a book cover that is specifically designed to grab their interest and attention. You need to have a product page that is laser focused on converting them into sales. And you need your book to be good enough that readers will want to actively recommend it and read your next book. But the thing you need to remember is that self-publishing isn't a solo pursuit. If you want to be professional about it, you can work with the exact same collaborators that the world's biggest authors work with. No matter how brilliant you are, you can't be the best at everything. Instead, you can go out and find those collaborators that can paper over those cracks, that can provide you with those extra skills and leave you with the time to do what you do best and what you love to do the most, which is, I hope, writing. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that panel discussion, which you may have noticed was not really a live panel. It was stitched together from some recordings I had our freelancers sent to us. I thought it would be an easier way to actually put together a panel rather than to use Zoom, and I was very much mistaken. It took a lot of time to do that. So thank you for sticking around to the end. If you are interested in taking part in a live publishing conference this year, 2025, we're hosting 6 online publishing conferences to which you are cordially invited. I'll cover all sorts of topics from how to plan a novel to how to revise, to how to land agents and secure publishing deals. In-depth presentations and panel discussions and Q&As. If you want to take part in our next one, there's a link in the description below and an opportunity to sign up for a year-long membership that will give you access to all 6 of those courses, plus additional open hours where you can ask professionals questions on a monthly basis. And as a special for you, there is a discount code which will get you a healthy little discount on that. So check that out, and I hope to see you at the next one of our conferences. In the meantime, if you enjoyed this, make sure you smash the subscribe button, hit like, and follow us for more great content. Until next time, I'll see you.